Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now a compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Like and share this video. Join the Rabyd Nation, a nation of people dedicated to normalizing atheism and deconversion by hitting the subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button. And your membership options that lead to citizenship in the Rabyd Nation will be presented to you. Today I'm continuing on in my series called Deconstructing Spiritual Disciplines. I've been kind of going through the list of disciplines that Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline book gave with all his discipline lists, and we've moved through the inward disciplines and the outward disciplines, and we're kind of engaging the four corporate disciplines that we've done so far, which has included confession and guidance. And now we've reached the third corporate discipline in his list, which is worship. Now, we're always trying to answer our three questions. We're always trying to deal with what is this thing? How did it appeal to us? How did it get a hold of us when we were religious? And is there anything good that can come out of any of these disciplines? We've been asking this question for all of these disciplines. Now, worship for a person deconstructing, especially if you're deconstructing to atheism like myself, is very, very problematic as to whether it has any benefit. Worship, if you define it, is the feeling of expression of reverence or adoration for a deity, showing reverence or adoration for a deity, or honoring something with religious rites. And it's the whole aspect of deity that kind of throws you out. The whole idea of worshiping, when Richard Foster talks about worship, he's talking about adoring the Christian God and giving the Christian God our submission as a corporate entity. This is a corporate discipline, something that we do together, something that Christians do together, or we do together. Growing up Pentecostal, the hands raised, the speaking in tongues while you're worshiping, the high energy praise music that was at the time controversial, but now seems to be in every church. All of this tapping into the emotions was very much a part of all this, and giving reverence to God. I think when you look at worship, you can be religious about a lot of other things, but religiosity and deity are very much a part of the definition of worship. Now, you can get some things that have kind of a religious devotion. I think immediately of politics, and you see people that are devoted to their political party or their political candidate with this kind of religious devotion. Fandoms, ideas, devoting yourself to a particular philosophy can be religious in nature, but it doesn't necessarily involve, a deity that you worship or looked up to. There's gurus and there's all kinds of other things. And the problem with worship is it has this inherent religious nature to it. And that's what becomes problematic for those of us deconverting. But I think in order for us to deconvert from it, we have to look at what worship tapped into. And this is our second question. Now we know what it is. What did it tap into when I was a believer? Well, when I was a young believer, the thought that I was worshiping God and that I was pleasing to God and that I was worshiping Him with my fellow believers in response to His love for us was a big, corporate binding, bringing together the group. And it was that God was the only one worthy of worship and reverence, and we were all doing that. There was also the idea of corporate submission, of bowing the knee to our King that is very, very much present. This idea of coming into the throne room of God, which was very much a part of my worship experiences all the way up until, I was, left the Assemblies of God. But even then, when I became a congregational minister, there was still this idea that when we were singing songs and hymns and stuff, we were coming into God's throne to give Him reverence. The idea of the church as a building that is a doorway into, the throne room of God is very much a sense, I think, in a lot of churches, if you really think about it. But it's that submission to something in a corporate sense that led to this emotional sense of togetherness, this emotional sense of oneness with your fellow believers and with God Himself. That you are now one with God. You're part of His group. You're part of His church. you're a king's kid, in children's church context. You are this. You are now part of something larger than yourself, and this sense of being part of something larger than yourself that had this emotional release, with all the things that go along with it. And I remember when I was at Asbury, there was this group that met together on a regular basis, people that were going to be future pastors in the Methodist Church, basically, most of them. And there were others, Episcopalians, a few others, but it was more of a, looking at the liturgy and looking at worship and seeing how to tap into spirituality. And one session that I sat in on was this idea of appealing to all the senses in worship, in a service, in a liturgy. So, for instance, like appealing to people's sense of smell by using incense or candles that give off a smell. And so, there's people I know that can walk into a church and tell you what time of year it is. If you blindfolded them, didn't tell them what the date was, and walked them into a church, they could, sniff, and they would know what time of year it is because of the incense that's being burned, Appealing to people's sense of touch. This is particularly evident in, like, certain rites like communion or baptism has that feeling to it of, you're getting, drenched in water, being buried and being raised to life. But this idea of appealing to all the senses, symbolism is very appealing to our sense of sight and hearing. There's a reason why religion is wrapped up in music, okay? Because the music appeals to us. We love music, and it appeals to us. And so it taps into this, our inward sense of humanity and our desire to long to be together. And, what do we do with that now that we are atheists? Now that I'm an atheist, what have I done with that? Well, is there anything that I can bring over from worship? I think because of the deity aspect, this is one discipline that I've taken the wrecking ball to far more often than Miley Cyrus did in her video. I have looked at any aspect of my life that has this blind adoration, this blind worship of anybody, anything, and just smashed it all to hell if I can. Because I think one of the things that becomes very apparent to me as somebody who's deconstructed is that worship is one of the main ways that the church keeps the autodeceptivity of faith going. It is the one thing that really taps into this autodeceptivity. Is churches have this good, strong, natural thing of community, and it stems from this idea of blind obedience, of submission in a corporate sense, that we're submitting to the kingdom of God, we're part of the kingdom of God, and we're making it go forward. And that kind of blind allegiance has led to a lot of abuse, and I don't really see a whole lot of good in worship. In the religious aspects, the deity aspects, of course, are completely gone for me. There's no deity for me to give this kind of adoration to, from my perspective. And so what is there left? Is there any kind of sense of anything good? And I think the thing with this one is we have to get rid of the aspects of deity and religious devotion, but that doesn't leave a lot left in worship, okay? That idea of tapping into something greater than ourselves a little bit, tapping into doing something as a community together that binds us together. Those are a couple aspects. And the problem with that is if you're going to be an atheist and deconverting away from your faith, none of that can really have anything to do with a God, okay, or any kind of religiosity. I've already talked this week, is atheism religion, and came to the conclusion, no. So atheism doesn't have anything, or secular, all this doesn't have any aspects of worship left, because worship is so inherently deity and religiosity focused. And so by the definition of religion, that's the way it is. And I'm not really sure that there's anything that if I use my analogy of deconstructing a house, my old house of faith, and now moving into my new house of rationality, there's just not a lot left to take here. I just don't see that there's any value to it. This is one of the disciplines that I have almost completely discarded because worship put me into this sense of blind obedience. And I think blind obedience is an absolute danger to any society. Because once you give your allegiance and blind obedience to something, your corporate submission, there's an old saying, there's nothing worse than stupidity in groups. And I think that's true. And we can be very blindly devoted to stuff. It's why a lot of people get frustrated with me, I think, because when I left the faith, I didn't just jump to the liberal Democrat camp, okay? Because, no, I don't think I think you can be blindly loyal to being a liberal and being a Democrat, too, without really thinking about, is there any value to what other groups are saying, or what other viewpoints are saying? And to be truly objective, I think you have to absolutely genuinely consider the utility of everybody's opinion. And a lot of times you can dismiss people's opinion because there is no utility to it. But every once in a while you run into somebody on the other side or in a different, camp, slightly different camp, that makes a lot of sense. And I also don't think that, the problem I have with both major political parties in the United States, for instance, and why, what I think can become religiosity type worship in a sense, where you replace the party or government in the spot of God, in that kind of devotion is platforms. Okay, is where they have this platform. If you're going to be a Democrat, you got to be anti-gun, pro-choice, all this other stuff. And I know secularists and atheists who have different viewpoints on those issues, and they have good rational reasons for it, and it has nothing to do with God. The idea of smaller government, larger government, people can be very devoted. Those are in political parties. And to me, the political party platform functions very much like a creed that you have to adhere to, or you're really not this. Okay, this is what we're going forward as a political party. So therefore, you have to give this blind allegiance and devotion. And I'm like, yeah, the hell with that. It's why I still don't belong to any political party, because I think platforms don't allow you any more wiggle room than a creed and a church does. And that's my personal opinion. You don't have to share it, but from my perspective, as somebody who came out of faith, I see this kind of devotion. I think politics is a good way to illustrate the dangers of this as well, because you can be blindly allegiance to anything. And to me, worship, to be a true person of rationality, worship just undercuts rationality a lot, because it makes you act in certain ways without evidence for the claims that you're dealing with. And I just don't see any value in that. I think the one thing that is in it, but I don't think is inherent with worship, is this sense of community. And I think that's the struggle. That's what I'm trying to rebuild in my house of rationality, is how to get a sense of community on something else besides religion and mythology. It's like, other than if you like to study mythology and have fun with it, I suppose that'd be a nice group. But how do you get that sense of community with something else? Now, a lot of people don't find this part of leaving faith very difficult, because they're extroverted, they're naturally people, and so they leave the church and they find other groups to be involved in. Often it's several smaller groups instead of this one big monolithic church group. But for those of us, such as myself, who are very introverted and autistic, and have a lot of high functioning anxiety and depression in social situations, it can be more difficult, and you have to find alternative means to get that sense of community back. I think I talk to a lot of you deconverting, and this is the thing you miss most, that sense of community and belonging. Well, worship taps into that, but it's not inherent with that. You can have a sense of community and belonging without worshiping a god or a deity or giving something religious reverence. You just have to find out what that is. And for every person, that's going to be different. For me, I don't know, that this YouTube community is starting to grow. I've made a few friends. I've never met most of you, probably all of you, in person, but we encourage each other and keep each other going, I suppose, as human being to human being. But I think, this is where the church and religious groups have a little bit more of an upper hand, because they don't think it's underhanded to appeal to deity and religious devotion. I think that's why people who get involved in political parties or political activist groups feel the same way, because they don't, there's nothing, politicians are not above the emotional appeal, okay, and they do it all the time. That's why I've told people to just look at the tactics of a preacher and look at the tactics of a politician and tell me how they're different. Go ahead. The tactics seem to be very much the same. Appeal to people's emotion, make promises you don't intend to keep or can't keep, and then, get their vote. And once you got their vote, you don't have to give them any more credence. Once you got their money as they drop it in the offer plate, you don't have to really do anything more. You've already achieved your objective. And so, the real objective and what the stated objective is very different. And so that's kind of how it works to me. Well, how do I get rid of that? Well, skepticism. I think it's skepticism that breaks down the religiosity God part. But it's our humanness, our emotions that keep drawing us to the sense of community that we still need to have. And I'm still struggling with that. I'll be honest, this is one of the biggest struggles I have, is now that worship is gone and this blind devotion and allegiance is gone and this religious devotion is gone, what do I tap into for me? It's what kept me in the church for so long. It was one place that my weird self was accepted to a point until I became a leader in it, and then it actually worked against me. So that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of, for me, that's where I'm at, and so I'm still struggling with this. So what can I take to my house? Well, I don't know. I'm taking a wrecking ball to most of it in my old house. Don't need it, destroyed it, walked out. And rationality doesn't really allow me to have this blind devotion to a deity or religious devotion to anything, really. And so I'm looking, I guess, to rebuild a sense of community in my new house, and I'm still a work in progress. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. And, I'd be interested to hear some of your stories about worship and how worship tapped into you and, how you've overcome it as you deconverted. So, but that's kind of my thoughts on it to this point. We've only got a couple more parts in this series. I'm going to talk next week about celebration, and then I'm going to wrap it up with a final video. But at this point, I think the journey, what we're trying to see is coming to fruition of what is in our old house. And worship is the best example of stuff that you completely can discard. Okay? I've had other ones that, you can pretty much keep all of this, but like study was a good one, except, getting rid of the religious, submission to the authority thing with the Bible. But a good, being studying and curious is good. Worship is kind of the direct opposite of that, which is like there's not a whole lot good here, and you can really dump it. And so I don't think an atheist does benefit from worship at all. So there it is. But, comment away. I'd like to hear your stories and stuff. So thank you very much for that. Thanks for every like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate all of you coming by to listen to me. I want to give a special shout out to my members, to my citizens, to my Rabyd citizens. With videos like this on deconversion, these guys, these folks, they are definitely the thing that makes this work, because I don't make a lot of money on these videos. When I look at the revenue from a particular video on deconversion, it's not very much. And it's the the members that pay for these videos. Okay, they're the ones that YouTube doesn't pay for these videos, members do. So thank them whenever you have a chance for doing that. But also, if you want to support, continued work in helping people deconstruct and reconstruct in their deconversion process, that's what I designed these Wednesday videos for. So, if that's something you want to support, consider becoming a member. I really would appreciate it. Thank you very much. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. So make sure you're not giving all this stuff to worshiping and the trappings of religion and faith, but rather give yourself and your time and your money and your energies to yourself and to building relationships with the people you love and care for, and to make this a better world. You'll be happier if you do. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.